The CEO of Parler is firing back, calling politicians like AOC sick and evil for calling for the banning of his company's app. For those that don't know this, Apple, Google, and Amazon all suspended services, or I should say banned, Parler. In the case of Amazon, they suspended web hosting services, meaning Parler is just gone. And then following this, basically every single vendor refused to work with Parler. This is a concerted effort. It is psychotic groupthink, cult-like behavior, and anybody who sees this should be freaking out. How do we function as a society when dominoes fall down because people are terrified of associating with a company that got bad press? Press that was not true. You see, they say that Parler was hosting incitement to violence. It's the lie they use over and over again. And these pathetic and spineless vendors, the smaller ones, are too stupid to actually look into what's going on. And so, you know what? I think we're in trouble as a society because massive multinational corporations love power and they will steal it and they will collude to get it. Parler sued Amazon, asserting that the reason they got banned was because Twitter and Amazon have a multi-year contract and Parler was the #1 app in the App Store. So all of these Silicon Valley companies conspire, essentially, or take concerted efforts, a better way to put it, to shut down anyone who challenges their system. And they've done it many times. And their sycophantic allies in media are glad to do it because gotta get them clicks. You end up with like out of 10 million people, 60 posts where people were inciting violence. Parler removes them. Amazon says, you know what? We don't care. We don't think you're going to place it. So you're banned. What they don't tell you is that at the same time, Twitter was hosting serious threats of violence and they wouldn't remove it. And Amazon didn't go to Twitter and complain and demand they do remove it. So it's really curious about Ocasio Cortez's position on this, getting a private company banned for fake reasons. I remember back when Patreon, remember when Patreon saw that exodus? Let me tell you a story. Many of you are probably familiar with Patreon. If you're not, it's a service where you can sign up and then people can choose to give you a certain amount of money. And then you can make posts that go to those certain members. I prefer just to make my own because of this problem. So you can go to timcast.com, become a member. We're getting the site built up, so forgive the errors and bugs for now. It's a coming. When many people started fleeing Patreon after a series of bans, it started with Lauren Southern. Lauren Southern gets banned from Patreon. And a bunch of people said, dude, you didn't give her a warning or a notice and you took away her income. That's not cool. So Patreon said, okay, we'll make sure to give everyone warnings. Then Sargon of Akkad, a.k.a. Carl Benjamin, got his Patreon removed without warning. This caused a mass exodus. Some very serious podcasts like Sam Harris jumped ship saying it's not worth the risk. Many of these creators went to a platform called Subscribestar, which was identical in almost every way to Patreon. People could choose to give you an amount of money. At a certain amount of money, you get certain rewards. You know, you get how the subscription platforms work. Well, interestingly then, the payment processors all pulled their service from Subscribestar, preventing people from fleeing and going to a rival company. It's sickening. So you want to know what really bothers me and what gets me really angry this morning? There's no left in this country. There's not. I guess it's weird to see conservatives calling for regulation, but what people often say when they point out, now conservatives are for regulation. Well, conservatives have been for regulation. This is what it's just insane to see the lies almost always from these left-wing personalities playing tribalism. Just because conservatives want to deregulate many things doesn't mean they all completely oppose regulation. They're not libertarians. They're conservatives, meaning they do like some regulation, mostly not. Whereas liberals tended to be in favor of regulating massive corporations. Where are my liberals at? They don't exist. Any one of these people coming out and defending massive multinational billion-dollar corporations to suppress the competition is not on the left. Sorry. You see, left and right in an economic sense refers to cooperative or competitive markets. They're advocating for a competitive market where unaccountable billionaires can crush the little guy. I don't, and I never have. Furthermore, I have always said, I believe that if you have a bakery and a gay couple comes in and they want a custom cake with a custom message, I believe that you should bake them that cake. And I think you don't need to consider it to be your speech. It is an interesting conundrum and a philosophical argument when it comes to the bakery scenario, because as conservatives pointed out, he had no problem serving the gay couple. He just didn't want to write that message. And my view is it is tough. And I respect the complaint. Maybe the solution is just don't. It's not your speech. You're being asked to provide a service like doing art. But it is respectfully. I hear the argument. My concern, though, is that if we are all members of this society, we are all funding the infrastructure to keep this place up and running, and you are occupying an area of a city that could be occupied by anybody else, we can't function if we are discriminating against people on the basis of race, gender, identity, and all that stuff, and that businesses should just serve the public in a general sense. So look, there's a very serious philosophical and ethical conundrum there. I get it. But I still think if I'm paying taxes, I don't think you should be able to discriminate. I don't. That's a left-wing position. I still hold that now. I believe that if you are Twitter operating on our infrastructure across this country and benefiting from our tax dollars, you should not be able to shut down legal opinions, legal speech. There's challenges there because there's got to be some kind of moderation. There's things you can put up that we all agree shouldn't be, like doxing, but isn't illegal. So there are conundrums and questions involved in how we moderate these platforms. My bigger concern is the Commons. The Commons, a left-wing position, surprise, surprise, is an idea that there are certain areas we all must share. We're not all immediately using, but we protect them to make sure that we all kind of get a fair shake. This is cooperative markets versus competitive. You see, left-wing, they don't want to tell you this. They want to tell you I'm right-wing, but I'll tell you this. If Tim Pool advocating for protecting the commons, regulating massive corporations, and defending the rights of a gay couple to get their custom message is right-wing, then what are they when they defend massive multinational billion-dollar corporations who use monopolistic power and concerted efforts in Silicon Valley to shut down their opponents? They're not the left. They're just authoritarian tribalists. They want power for themselves, and that's it. And that's Ocasio-Cortez. She's not... And as far as I can tell, and as far as my opinion goes, she is a fake leftist. Absolutely fake. It is tribalism, not true cooperative markets. You know who's a real leftist? Jimmy Dore. Why? He calls out the corporations. He calls out the censorship. He calls out the government, and he advocates for universal health care, Medicare for all. A left-wing position. Cooperative healthcare systems, not competitive. There's no profit to be made. We just agree that some things we're going to work on together. That's the left-wing argument. And the funny thing is, when you argue with conservatives about universal health care from an actual, good faith standpoint, you will disagree and you will get along. And they might call you dumb and you laugh. And as long as you're respectful and polite, we move on and we move on with our lives. In what way? In any way is anti-competitive monopolistic action left-wing? It's not. And now I'll throw it to the right. In what way is Republicans and conservatives calling for the regulation of big tech a right-wing position? It is. Because like I said, just because conservatives have historically opposed much regulation doesn't mean they oppose all regulation. And that I learned because I actually talked with conservatives about it, saying, well, there's a lot of things we don't like in terms of regulation, but we accept some of it. We're not libertarians. I'm like, that's a good point. Libertarians are the ones who are very much like free market. The freer the market, the freer the people, right? I don't actually agree. I think a mixed economy works better. But here we go. Instead of me ranting, let me read you the actual news. Fox News says, Parler CEO John Matz blasted elected officials such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who recently called for the censorship of his social media app and proclaimed it sick and evil. The CEO said critics like Ocasio-Cortez don't understand what America stands for. AOC recently urged Apple and Google to take action against Parler. In a tweet, the leader of the so-called squad sent to her 11.4 million followers. Ocasio-Cortez isn't alone. Many people on the left have made similar complaints. It's, when we're on the IRL podcast, Ian likes to say often, it's not left and right. Stop saying left and right. And I said, it's just a colloquial term for the tribes. But I get it. I really, really do. We had Jen Perlman on. She's a progressive and she opposes, a lot of the same stuff. She's very, very similar in a way to Jimmy Dore. And so maybe there really needs to be some kind of reclamation of what left means. Because it doesn't mean what this is. Since when was the left about propping up corporations? Last I recall, we were out on Wall Street 10 years ago. I mean, we as in like people of this country and the left, screaming, we are the 99%. Now what? Now it's, yay, billionaires. Yay. Right. Bernie Sanders doesn't say millionaires anymore. I think it's sick, Matz told Fox News. That's not what the Constitution says. That's not what the Constitution stands for. Banning 10 plus million U.S. voters from the internet, barring people from free speech. When people do things like that, it shows that they don't understand the meaning of the Constitution or this country and what it stands for. Well, Matz doesn't appreciate elected officials calling for his company to be silenced. He found himself at the center of the news cycle when Google and Apple removed Parler from the App Store. I have an interesting question about the First Amendment and federal politicians calling for the mass censorship of the American people. It's not a law being created, but I'm not sure that the government officials are supposed to be doing that. Now, John says the Constitution. Look, I'll recognize there's a difference between a private corporation and public institutions. And, you know, we can have a conversation about how right now, literally, Twitter is a private platform. They can ban who they want. I'm saying it should not be that way. Okay, this is the difference. I love it. I've heard, but my private company so much. You know, let me tell you something. I had an epiphany recently. And, I used to go out and fundraise for environmental organizations. And I remember being on the ground in L.A. fundraising because of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. That's right. You see, there was an oil rig in the Gulf and oil started spraying all over the place. I was upset and I was demanding action. And I was asking people to help contribute so that we could raise awareness about what was going on, because a lot of people don't know. And then we can, effectively do two things: lobby politicians to have better protections and actually help get the whole mess cleaned up. But I realized something today. I was wrong. BP's a private corporation. They can do whatever they want. I mean, they have permits to operate there in the Gulf. So if an oil spill happens, well, why don't you start your own company to go clean up the oil? What's that you say? It's not the same thing. You're saying that we must regulate these corporations because they would cause damage to common areas where we all must operate? And that the damage coming from the Deepwater Horizon could grow worse if left unchecked? Oh, my. Oh, wow. I was wrong. So what you're saying is that Twitter and Facebook, who have monopolized political discourse and the news cycle, destroying the news industry in this country, surprise, surprise, this is something we've known about for some time. News organizations are collapsing because the ad revenue is being sucked up by these other platforms. So you mean to tell me that these companies have destroyed journalism? They've centralized it into the hands of venture capital funded, rage bait blogs. And now they are destroying the common areas of political discourse after they monopolized it. Well, hot dog, sounds like we need some regulation. I've always been in favor of regulating corporations when they destroy the commons. My opinion on that hasn't changed. Apparently theirs has. Well, now the CEO of Parler is facing death threats from Newsweek. John Matz, the CEO of Parler, has claimed he has received death threats and can't go home after the social network was tied to last week's U.S. Capitol riots and sent offline by Amazon. On Sunday, Amazon Web Services suspended Parler's web hosting account at just about midnight, shutting it down. Amazon cited Parler's refusal to remove extremist content and offensive content posted by its users. Not true. That is not true, Newsweek. I am so sick of it all being fake. Every day I read this stuff. They can't just read this stuff. Amazon said they were concerned that Parler would not take action. Not that they didn't. Not that there were existing threats. Amazon said that we do not believe that your moderation will be effective. Period. Because, and the reason they said this, Parler was removing these things. So Amazon can't come out and say they weren't. That would be defamation. And they would lose that case. No, what they're saying is we don't think your efforts will work, so we're suspending you. That's not what Newsweek is saying. They're saying refusal to remove. You see how they lie? They just lie all the time. Every day I read this stuff. You can look at the statement from Amazon. But this writer for Newsweek, whatever, I don't care who it is too lazy and stupid to actually do their jobs. And these people do their jobs. And this is why we end up in the position we're in. It's fake news all the way down. But it's like a game of telephone. You know, that's what the problem is. Instead of going to the source, these people just read each other's news and they write it. And then the best part is when it makes its way to Wikipedia. I mean, that's it. One outlet will write something fake, and then 100 outlets will just copy this outlet and cite it as their source. What happened to the source having to be the actual source? Like, let me put it this way. Amazon Web Services should be the actual source, right? Instead, what Newsweek is citing is itself. Itself. You see how that works? I'm reminded of the Simpsons episode joke where Bart whispers in the ear of the teachers union. You know, Skinner says that the union will fold. And then by the time it makes it to the teacher, Krabappel, she says, Skinner says the union will fold, purple monkey dishwasher. That purple monkey dishwasher comment goes too far, something like that. Making a joke about how the communication breaks down. There's another game that people play where they have everyone holding each other's shoulders, and then they draw on there's a piece of paper on their back, and they draw, and then the person in front is trying to figure out what it is. And there are other games where they play telephone, where they tell one person a phrase, and then they have it go all the way down the line to see what the phrase turns into. That's what we deal with in media. It used to be that if you wanted to do a story, you would actually go to Amazon and post a link to their official statement. Now, Newsweek just links to their own article, and so it's a derivative game of being wrong nonstop all day, every day. And it's making people go insane. Quite literally. Joel Rubin, the perfect example of the game of telephone. This guy, let's see, who is this guy? He's verified on Twitter. He is AJ Congress, former Obama-Biden deputy assistant secretary of state. He says, Glenn Beck has the right to be upset about Twitter's ban of Donald Trump, but using a Holocaust analogy, especially only days after real Nazis stampeded our capital, is not the way to do it. He should retract his statement and apologize to Auschwitz Museum. Oh, I didn't realize real Nazis stormed the Capitol. I thought it was this guy, the crazy guy.
I'm going to post up some video of you dancing.
The weird horns.
Let's talk about the spiritual aspect.
Look at this guy.
Of what you do. And
Look at okay.
Like
listen to this.
Infiltrator or something like that. They'd be a witch. They'd be a sorcerer or something like that on the dark side. So I practice life magic. I practice the light side or the positive side of shamanism. And when they see me, they go, "Oh, yeah, we got a big fish out here. We better not try and stir things up." Well,
he practices life magic. So when the witches and the sorcerers come and want to change the timeline, no joke, that's what he talks about, they'll realize he's a big fish. Literal Nazis. I mean, look, I know that there was some Nazis were obsessed with occult stuff, sure. And these people storming the Capitol were really nuts. But this is what happens when they just keep doing this. Now someone's going to see this verified tweet. They're going to include it in a story, and they're going to keep shifting the narrative and gaslighting over and over again as they drive themselves into a permanent state of psychosis, leading to the banning and mass censorship of individuals because of their paranoid delusions. Did you know that you probably didn't know this, and I'm only learning this recently. The left has a psychotic conspiracy on par with Q about subversive. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to entertain these or direct anybody in any way. There's the QAnon stuff everybody knows about. It's been all over the media. But the left has something nearly identical where they believe basically the same thing, but in opposition, right? So as Q supporter, like QAnon people, they like Q. The left has basically the same thing where they don't like Q. It's not Q, it's something else. But it's basically the same thing where they believe, I don't want to say it's Russia. It's very, very similar to where they think there's underground networks infiltrating the US and subverting things, and there are secret messages being put out. You've probably seen a lot of talk about dog whistles from Trump. They really do believe the exact same things. It's people just going insane. The paranoid delusion is escalating. And the problem is Jack Dorsey lives in it. I had a conversation with Dave Smith, comedian, the other day on IRL podcast, and he brought up a point where he said, when I was on with Joe Rogan and Vijay Gadde and Jack Dorsey, I brought up that they are so biased they can't even tell they're biased because they think their biased opinions are just normal American opinion. They've not ever talked to a conservative to realize what they think is actually fringe. And so this is exactly what happens. Jack Dorsey sees the fringe psychotic conspiracies from people who believe there's like a deep network, international plot to overthrow the U.S. using Donald Trump. And they believe it. because they think their circle is mainstream America. When in reality, they're trapped in a psycho bubble. It is just not reality. Just like the Q people, they think it's true. It's just not. It's not true. It's never been true. It's been wrong so many times, and people just keep believing it. The left has something similar. It's basically the same thing. But when Jack Dorsey's people at Twitter, who are all hard left biased, and I'm not saying like socialist, I'm saying like they're tribalist left biased, they see all these tweets from journalists and they just assume it must be true. They don't fact check. Now, listen, I don't necessarily blame all of them, because if a journalist says something, I mean, far be it from a random computer programmer or plumber to just decide they know what's actually going on. They trust the journalists, right? The problem is the journalists have gone insane. I'm not kidding. Many of them have outright just totally lost their minds. They're falling into the same exact traps and conspiracy thinking that we see from Q people. Now, there are moderate traditional liberals. We call them default liberal. I think that was Breitbart who coined that phrase. And they're not really politically active, the exhausted majority. And then you have moderate conservatives who are, and they're looking at this stuff saying, this has gone crazy. You have people on the fringe right who believe crazy stuff. And you have people in the mainstream left who believe extremely similar psychotic conspiracy trash. So how do you deal with it? You don't. I'll tell you this. If you're a regular person, a moderate person, and you're concerned about the fringe conspiracy types like the shaman of life magic storming the Capitol, the problem I see is the institutions have been subverted by the same thing. That guy talking about life magic, you realize the left believes like a lot of the same stuff. Not all of them, but they have their shamanic, crystal-wearing, crazy hippie people who are also at these institutions of power and controlling them. The issue? Conservatives and people on the right have always targeted political institutions, failing to realize that politics is downstream from culture. And so the left entered academia and they entered the news organizations and then hired all their friends, creating this bubble world of paranoid delusions. And here we are. And this is how you get to the point where people like AOC claim to be on the left, but basically do whatever they can to drop to the ground to lick the boots of the massive billion-dollar corporations. Congratulations, left. In less than a decade, you went from we are the 99% to, but it's a private company and they can do what they want. Sounds a whole lot like the Koch brothers did. Great. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.